Look at almost any real engineering flow. Air tearing over a wing, fuel mixing in an engine, blood surging through the aorta, and you'll find turbulence, chaotic, swirling, churning motion. It's the normal state of fluids in the real world, and is the single hardest thing in all of CFD. Not because we don't know the equations, we do. Is that solving them honestly for turbulence is so expensive that nobody can. So instead, we model it. So what is turbulence physically? It's motion across an enormous range of scales at once. A turbulent flow is full of eddies, swirls of fluid in every size, big lazy ones the width of the whole pipe, down through smaller and smaller whirls, all tangled together. A laminar flow moves in clean layers. A turbulent one is eddies within eddies within eddies, chaotic and three-dimensional and never quite repeating. And those eddies are organized in a way. Energy comes in at the large scales. Big eddies stirred up by the geometry. Those big eddies are unstable. They break into smaller eddies, which break into smaller ones still. Energy cascades down the size scale, from big to small, handed along without much loss, until it reaches the very smallest eddies. And there, where the whirls are tiny and the gradients are fierce, viscosity finally takes over and grinds the motion into heat. Big eddies to small eddies to warmth. That's the energy cascade. And here's the problem that creates. The gap between the biggest eddies and the smallest grows fast with the Reynolds number. To capture all of it directly, every eddy down to the tiniest, the number of grid cells you'd need scales like the Reynolds number to the 9/4 power. For the Reynolds numbers of a real car or aircraft, up in the millions, that's more cells than any computer on Earth can hold, and the time steps to match. Solving turbulence by brute force is, for real engineering, simply impossible. So the whole game becomes, how much do you resolve and how much do you model? There's a spectrum. At one end, direct numerical simulation, DNS, resolves every last eddy. It's exact, and it's reserved for low Reynolds numbers and research because of that cost. In the middle, large eddy simulation, LES, resolves the big, important eddies and models only the small ones, which behave more universally. It's expensive, but doable. And at the cheap end, the workhorse of industry, RANS, doesn't resolve the turbulence at all. It models the whole thing and solves only for the averaged flow. RANS is worth a closer look because it's what most engineers actually run. The idea is to time average the equations, splitting every quantity into a steady mean plus a fluctuation, and solve only for the mean. But when you average the nonlinear momentum equation, the fluctuations don't vanish. They leave behind an extra term, the Reynolds stresses, the average effect of all that turbulent churning on the mean flow. And those stresses are new unknowns. You suddenly have more unknowns than equations. That gap is called the closure problem, and closing it is the whole job of a turbulence model. The most common closure is a neat piece of physics. Turbulence mixes momentum, smearing fast and slow fluid together, and that is exactly what viscosity does too. So we model the turbulent stresses as if they were just extra viscosity, an eddy viscosity, added on top of the fluid's real one. The famous models, K epsilon and K omega, are recipes for computing that eddy viscosity from a couple of transported quantities, the turbulent kinetic energy and the rate at which it dissipates. It's an approximation, and it has limits, but it's good enough to have designed most of the machines around you. So turbulence is multi-scale chaos, an energy cascade from big eddies down to small. There are too many scales to resolve directly, except at low Reynolds number, so you choose where to sit. LES resolves the big eddies. RANS models all of them and solves the averaged flow, closing the gap with an eddy viscosity. There's no exact answer here, only a chosen trade-off between cost and fidelity. Knowing what your turbulence model assumes is part of knowing whether to trust the result. That's all for this video.